At this point in 2021, I feel like the Black Clover discourse is in a pretty good place. The series has transcended its rough start, and it's mostly just people, like me, talking about how much they enjoy the show. But the one complaint I still see fairly often online is about Yuno. That people don't like Yuno, that Yuno isn't a good character, and that he just picks up power-ups off screen and they don't feel earned. And that's what we're here today to discuss. Because I actually think Yuno is pretty perfect for the story that Black Clover is trying to tell. Let me explain. Yuno is admittedly a weird character for me in the grand scheme of Black Clover, because I think he's a great rival for Asta, but also I wouldn't immediately jump out and say he's one of my favorite characters. But also I'm a Mimosa Asta shipper, so why should my opinion matter anyway? For most of the series, Yuno is very much a side character, with most of the Black Bulls getting much more direct development than he ever does. He's actually a lot like the rival in Pokemon. You won't see him for a little while, and then suddenly he's back and more powerful. And that's the core of our issue here. Many of Yuno's power-ups happen off-screen, while we watch Asta and the Black Bulls fight tooth and nail to overcome challenges and become stronger. I mean, Asta literally can't use his arms for an entire arc, and he's still training. This then manifests as dislike for Yuno, or claims that he's poorly written because he just gets power-ups. To this end, I've actually seen some specific complaints about Yuno's spirit magic power-up through Sylph, but that is admittedly a bit harder to take seriously because Asta also literally got a magic demon grimoire. It's not like he's out here just fighting with his fists, folks. Off-screen or not, I am of the mind that Yuno's strength is still wholly his. From the very beginning, we see him make an oath to get stronger, and even going from the initial flashback to where the series starts, he's clearly put in the work both mentally and physically to improve himself. I think it's easy to see that he's as passionate about being the best as Asta is, and puts in the work to do so. However, what makes this tough for the viewer is that we rarely ever see it. But I actually think that's part of the point. He's supposed to be the rival. If he did everything the same way Asta did, then it wouldn't make for much of a rivalry. His 4-leaf is at odds with Asta's 5, Spirit Magic versus Devil, Golden Dawn versus Black Bulls, and most importantly, hard work versus talent. Yuno is naturally talented, and while I think we get the he's just a peasant thing beaten into our heads a bit too much, he was born with an immense amount of magical power and the ability to control it. Tabata could show us him crafting new moves or training with the Golden Dawn, but through everything we know about his character, he probably doesn't have much trouble accomplishing any of these things. He has very little trouble with anything while he's on screen for most of the series, so I sincerely doubt he has many issues out on off-screen missions. Meanwhile, Asta is far more compelling and gets more screen time, not just because he's the MC, but because he's starting at absolute zero. There's a lot more room for growth and a lot more for us to actually be shown. Yuno grows from one of the stronger low-level magic knights to as strong as a captain, which is a smaller jump than Asta's growth from small muscular guy with a sword to the Silver Surfer. All of this is then why I think the beginning of the Spade arc is so important for Yuno's character. We kinda just assume at this point that he can take on anyone through raw talent and maybe some hard work. He's more or less invincible, and it's only a matter of time before he becomes the captain of the Golden Dawn. Then he gets his ass handed to him by Xenon, girl of the 21st century.
Penis, Commander!
After that, two important things happen. We see him fully lose his composure for close to the first time in the series, and then he mega trains. While I do still think he's working hard the entire time, this is the first time where we very clearly see he has to work to improve because talent is no longer enough and he learned that the hard way. I also think it's an important narrative beat that Asta defeats Dante, obviously with the help of Yami, while Yuno loses to Xenon and needs to be protected by Vengeance. It ever so slightly shows us that Asta has surpassed him more or less and puts even more of an emphasis on Yuno's need to really hardcore train. This then leads into the most important part for me here. Yuno is very well written in my eyes, and I don't even think it has anything to do with his magical power levels. What's ultimately refreshing for me about Yuno is that his character is competitive but always maintains his respect and love towards his foster brother and rival. Sure, he's cocky in so much as he knows he's strong, but he never looks down on weaker people simply because he has become stronger. That's where his backstory and Asta really grounds him. However, I do wonder if his aloof attitude does simply add another reason to dislike him, independent of everything else. Still, I feel like it would have been so easy to simply write Yuno as an edgy, mean, pseudo-antagonist for Asta to eventually overcome, and it probably wouldn't have hurt the overall story too much, but I find it so much better that he's a character we get to watch grow alongside Asta, and their fights together in the Elf arc are only enhanced because of that. It's not a villain to hero story, it's simply the payoff of their 16 plus years of friendship, and I think that's a lot more rewarding for us than yet another bad boy turned good. Yuno may take a very different path to power than Asta does at times, but when it comes down to it, he still comes from these same humble beginnings as Asta, and still wonderfully conveys the story's theme that anyone can become strong enough to protect others. And that is why I think he's perfect for this story. And then that was kind of undercut by making him the prince of a foreign country, but I guess it explains the immense amount of latent power a bit better, doesn't it? Magic is everything! But even if he was born royalty, he still grew up as a peasant, and without diving too deep into nature versus nurture, I think that matters. And in fact, you could also argue that Asta got his power from his mother, so it's fine. Ultimately, would Yuno being involved in the story more as he's growing have benefited his character? Absolutely. More screen time naturally endears most characters to the audience. But would it have benefited the story of Black Clover? I don't think so. I think the way he is used now is far and away more beneficial to the overall story, and I think he is a well-written character with clear motivations, personality, and yes, sometimes a big spirit elf wind power-up. Yuno very clearly has his place in this story, and it's not as an MC2, it's as Asta's friend and biggest rival who both stands in his way and lifts him up, and I'll always appreciate him for that. I am not caught up with the manga, but I can only hope that more Yuno screen time has softened some of the harder stances on his character, and if it hasn't, hopefully you can at least see where I'm coming from when I say Yuno is a great character. I don't think you have to like him, but I'd like to think that we can all admit that Tabata does know what he's doing. I'm excited to catch up sometime soon while we all wait for this movie, and feel free to fire off your Yuno opinions down in the comments. I'm sure there are plenty of staunch Yuno antis, and that is okay. Because my last point that I want to make is that at the beginning of this video, I kind of lumped people not liking Yuno alongside people thinking Yuno is not well written. While I do think they are often linked, you are free to not like Yuno. You can feel however you want about any of these characters. I'm not your dad. Unless you dislike Asta, at which I am your dad, go to your room. I simply wanted to show that Yuno has good writing and a great role in this wonderful story. While Asta will always be my fave, I do hope that Yuno continues to get treated well as the series moves forward, and hopefully one day we can all celebrate not only our big beautiful buff boy, but his best friend as well.